Hello, TikTok. It's good to talk to you. Unfortunately, if you're watching this, it means I've watched 13 ghosts, and I am no longer among the living. I've instructed my lawyer, Mr. Loss, to deliver this essential review in my last will and testimony. I do hope you enjoy. Terrible review. Hello, all you horror fans, and welcome to Terrible Reviews. I'm your host, David, and today's movie is 13 Ghosts. Now, I do need to give you a quick warning. If you have epilepsy, before you go and watch this movie, just know 50% of this movie is flashing lights. You've been warned. Keep that in mind, please. I do not want anyone dying watching this movie. Another note. I am only reviewing the movie itself. There is lore for this movie that you can find online and in books, but I am only reviewing this movie as if you're going into it blind without any of that extra information. So just keep that in my scores, because I do get a little harsh in a few areas here. And it is because of that, because the lore definitely adds a lot to this movie that it is missing. So, without further ado, we'll get into the review. So, Terror. Was this movie scary? For me personally, not really. The gore and everything was great, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. As far as like story-wise and actually like being unsettling and everything, this movie didn't really like do anything for me. So I can only give Terror a 2 out of 5. Now, let's get into the gore and find out some of the good in this movie. Gore, I'm going to give a 4 out of 5, and that is because the practical effects in this movie are almost like just perfection. The ghosts in this movie, the kills that they do show in this movie, oh my god, they are so good. They are so good. The ghosts in general, just by themselves, 10 out of 10. Love them. But the detractor for this movie is the CG. It did not hold up at all. Luckily, it's very few and far between, so I didn't really take off much for it, but what they do have in this movie is pretty awful in today's standards, so I did have to take off a little bit there. But again, the practical effects in this movie, awesome. If you love practical effects, definitely watch this movie. They did a great job. There's a kill after the introduction when they first get into the house that is, oh my god, so good. I loved it. But we're going to get back into the bad with the story. How was the story in this movie? It was awful. It was just plain awful. I can only give the story a 2 out of 5, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. So, first off, the story in general, the character development and everything did not make a lot of sense. The decisions that the characters were making made even less sense, and it was like really kind of just a jumbled mess in and of itself. It definitely felt like there needed to be an extra like 15 or so minutes of this movie so that they could explain some of the lore and kind of get you into the actual world of the movie, but it was missing, and it definitely took away from the movie. Another thing that took away was the phoned in acting. Matthew Lillard did amazing. You can tell he was trying. The things that took away from me were the child and Cyrus. The child, I am so happy disappeared for most of this movie, because it honestly felt like he was just reading off cue cards off to the side, and just like, it was awful. You'll know what I mean in the very beginning of the movie. It was so weird, and the dialogue is so weird. It's weird. And then Cyrus, I forget the actor's name. I don't even want to bother looking it up. He phoned it in. It was awful. He did awful. I did not like it at all. It was very cheesy. And I get, like, some of this movie they were going for that. Like, to be honest, like, it felt like they were going for that. But it just wasn't good to me. So, 2 out of 5 there as well. And then lastly, fun. Was this movie fun to watch? Absolutely yes. I had a great time watching this movie, even with the detractors that I talked about before. The ghosts in general in this movie are awesome. Every time they're on screen, it's awesome. Anytime that Matthew Lillard's doing stuff, like, it's intriguing. But like I said, some of the acting is phoned in and the story doesn't make any sense at all. So, fun. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 just because I did enjoy looking at this movie so much. And just not so much like hearing what the characters were saying or knowing what they were doing. So, was this movie terrible? or terrifying? I would say it was terribly terrifying. So, I would recommend that you watch 13 Ghosts, but I would also definitely recommend that you check out the lore for the ghosts before you do that. There's plenty of websites and everything that you can find this lore at. It is definitely well worth checking out, and it definitely adds to this movie a lot because they don't really explain any of that in the movie, which I don't get. If they had done that, this movie would have been so much better because the backstories for these ghosts are awesome. They're great. Like the lore is epic. Like it could have done so much for this world and for this movie in general, and they just didn't have it in the movie itself. So if you went and saw this in theaters, you wouldn't know any of this, and you probably wouldn't have that much of a good time. But yeah, have you seen 13 Ghosts? If you have, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to follow, and I'll see you in the next review.